Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual non-deal roadshow. My name is Karina Tatarinova, a virtual event moderator here at Renmark. And on behalf of our team, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us, especially those of you in New York and surrounding areas, for the presentation of Perpetua Resources Corporation, trading on the Toronto Stock Exchange, as well as the NASDAQ under ticker symbol PPTA. And presenting today will be Chris Fogg, IR Manager, and he will be joined by Jessica Largent, Chief Financial Officer, for the Q&A. Now with that, Chris, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Karina. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce Perpetua and our project, the Stibnite Gold Project, located in central Idaho. As you mentioned, our stock trades on both the Toronto and NASDAQ stock exchanges under symbol PPTA. Our name, Perpetua Resources, is a nod to the great state of Idaho's state motto, which is Esto Perpetua, meaning let it be perpetual, and signifies the vast natural resources that contribute to the state's economy. Our vision is simple. Number one, we plan to develop and operate one of the highest grade, lowest cost gold mines in the United States. Number two, provide the country with a critical mineral, antimony, critical for clean energy and defense and military applications. And number three, restore an abandoned brownfield site. I'll just take a moment to point to slides 2 and 3 for our cautionary statements. Given the low cost of our project, we have a payback period of under 3 years and a 15-year reserve life. And a big driver of those low costs is our valuable byproduct of antimony. We're located in one of the best mining jurisdictions in the world, in Idaho, and we have strong political and community support for our project. One of the reasons that we are so unique is that we'll take an area that has been abandoned after 100 years of mining activity, most of which was in the World War II and Korean War eras, and we'll use a sustainable approach to restore that environment and develop a modern mining project, helping to power a lower carbon future. Our project has one of the largest independent gold mineral reserves and is 7th largest of all U.S. mineral deposits. We have 4.8 million ounces of proven and probable reserves, 6 million ounces of total M&I resources, and an additional 1.2 million ounces of inferred gold resources. And that does not include our significant antimony endowment. We have 148 million pounds of antimony reserves and a total of 206 million pounds of antimony resources. Our project is high grade. Over the life of mine, the average gold grade is 1.4 grams per ton, and over the first 4 years of the project life, the average grade is 2.2 grams per ton. Over the life of mine, our project will produce approximately 300,000 ounces of gold per year. And in the early years of our project, we'll produce much higher than that, about 460,000 ounces of gold per year. And that would make it one of the largest US gold producing mines outside of the Nevada Gold Mines joint venture. We will be able to tap into one of the lowest carbon emissions grids in the country, in Idaho. And that low cost of power from the hydropower generated in Idaho, combined with the valuable antimony byproduct and the low strip ratio of our project, puts us in the lowest quartile of the global cost curve. Over the life of mine, our all-in sustaining costs will average under $650 per ounce, and in the early years of our project, will average under $450 per ounce. At current gold prices, the NPV of our project is nearly $1.9 billion. And we have significant leverage to higher gold prices as well. And importantly, our project is also resilient to lower gold prices given our low cost of operations. Today, we trade at only 12% of that project NPV, and obviously at a significant discount. And we think that this is an attractive entry point for new investors given that discount. Antimony is listed as one of 50 critical minerals in the US, given that Russia and China they really dominate over 70% of the world's supply. And the US right now has no domestic antimony production. And our plan is to change that. We plan to reestablish domestic antimony production right here at home. Historically, antimony has been used as an alloy strengthener. Today, you can find it in solar panels, wind turbines, cell phones, and most notably, a liquid metal battery technology. We're seeing growing bipartisan support in Congress for antimony and critical minerals in general, but specifically antimony. Most recently, the House and Senate Armed Services Committees both included antimony specifically in drafts of the National Defense Authorization Act. And just as another example of growing support, the House included about $10 million in a Department of Defense appropriations bill to study how to secure the supply of antimony domestically. Our project can supply over 35% of annual US demand for antimony over the first 6 years of the project. Last year, we signed a significant supply agreement with a company called Ambri, Inc., who is developing a low-cost liquid metal battery. They're based in Massachusetts. And this agreement, our supply agreement with them, really establishes a foundation to facilitate the transition to that lower carbon economy. Ambri's battery is low cost, as I mentioned, long duration, daily cycling. It's a grid scale battery storage system. And we will provide, on the Perpetua side, the only domestically responsibly sourced production of antimony for their batteries. Our minimum supply agreement can supply over 13 gigawatt hours of energy storage. And to put that into perspective, that's over 8 times the total additions to the US energy storage market in 2020. And that's enough to power approximately 1 million American homes over the 20-year lifespan of the batteries. So we think that this partnership really shows and really demonstrates how modern mining can play a role in that clean energy transition. Our plan calls for early restoration and improving water quality. We'll unblock fish passage that has been blocked for over 80 years, allowing salmon and other species of fish to migrate upstream, which they haven't been able to do. We'll reprocess, reuse, and safely store over 10 million tons of tailings and spent ore. And these pictures on this slide are what the site looks like today, obviously impacted by over 100 years of mining activity. We have a well-defined, as I mentioned, mineral reserve. We know that there is gold and antimony in the ground. And right now we are focused on permitting for our project. To give you a little context for how we got to where we are today and where we're headed. In 2010, we started baseline environmental studies, collecting data, and gathering public feedback. In 2016, we submitted our first plan of restoration operations to the U.S. Forest Service, who is the lead agency for the NEPA permitting process. After gathering additional public feedback in 2019, we submitted a modified plan of restoration and operation to the U.S. Forest Service. And then in 2020, after a 75-day comment period where we received over 10,000 public comments, 85% of which were positive, we made additional refinements and refined that modified plan. Made some of the pits smaller, reduced some of the overall footprint of the project, and included additional environmental considerations. And then in December of 2020, we submitted that modified plan. Last year, in the middle of 2021, the Forest Service published an updated schedule for our plan going forward. So right now, the Forest Service is focused on our proposed plan, or modified proposed plan, after eliminating 2 other alternatives. That same plan with 1 alternative access route to site. And so the upcoming catalysts that we expect are in next quarter. We expect the Forest Service will publish a supplemental draft environmental impact study. That timeline puts Q2 of next year for the final environmental impact study and the draft record of decision for our project. And then in late 2023, we expect the final record of decision for the project. Looking at some of our recent accomplishments and upcoming milestones, last year we were included in the NASDAQ. We were listed on the NASDAQ, so we've been trading on the NASDAQ for about a year now. We're excited about our upcoming permitting milestones, but even very excited to begin early action legacy cleanup at site this summer. So shovels in the ground this summer. This slide again shows that we are trading at only 12% of our project's NPV, despite those recent accomplishments and our near-term catalysts coming up. We expect a significant re-rating of our shares as we get through those permitting milestones, And we think that this is an attractive entry point for investors to get in now and as we continue to re-rate and progress through those milestones. Summing it all up, why are we unique? We're unique because number one, we're developing one of the highest grade, lowest cost assets in the country. We're providing a critical mineral and antimony that's needed for clean energy and for defense applications. And number three, we're restoring a brownfield site and providing cleanup of the backyard in Idaho. So thank you. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
Perfect, and thank you so much for your presentation, Chris. And as you mentioned, we will now begin the Q&A portion of this presentation, for which Jessica will be joining us as well. I'll start with the financial questions here. The first question is, how much has Perpetua invested into the project to date?
So in total, up to now, there's been about $300 million total investment in the project. We're well capitalized currently. We raised $57.5 million late last year. So we're well capitalized to continue well through the permitting process into next year. But yeah, overall about $300 million since 2010.
When was your last raise and how much was it and what are the terms?
Chris hit the highlights. It was August of 2021. We raised $57.5 million in gross proceeds. It was just a public offering. There were no specific terms. We raised the money to allow us to continue advancing permitting and through that process, as well as the early restoration work Chris mentioned that we're starting earlier this year. What was really good to see during that raise is the amount of U.S. generalist and value-oriented investors that participated in that raise. And so we were quite happy. I think it really spoke to the strength of our investment thesis and the fact that we are good value right now.
What is your current cash position and how far will that take you?
As of end of April, early May, we had about $40 million in cash. Right now, our run rate is about $2 to $2.3 million per year to continue permitting and the ASAOC work. And so we expect that cash to last us well into the second half of next year, 2023.
Who are your largest shareholders and how much stock does management own?
Yeah, so on the slide you can see here, we've got Paulson & Co. At about 39.3%. They have been very supportive shareholders since 2016 and are committed to the vision we've got at Perpetua and the fact that we get to not only develop a world-class gold asset, but also provide the critical mineral antimony while we're restoring the environment. In terms of insider ownership, we did have a board refresh in late 2020. We brought on some really strong and diverse board members that will help us in this next phase as we move to development and construction. So it's a new board structure, and they have been with the company a little over a year and a half now. So total insider ownership is about 0.2% in shares. But if you look at the options and units for the team, it's close to 2% and growing.
Looking at the stock, Perpetua seems to still be in favor with investors. What are you doing differently than your peers?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, we're unique in that we have a site that has a legacy mining site, and that's not unique in itself. But I think what sets us apart is we didn't just submit a plan of operations. We submitted a plan of restoration and operations. So it's important to note that as we're mining and providing the gold and antimony from the project, we're also simultaneously restoring and reclaiming the site. So rather than wait till the end of mine life to reclaim the site, we're doing that concurrently and even starting that before operations began. So that action and that commitment is part of the reason that we've been able to successfully generate so much community and political support for the project.
Congratulations on the Clean Air Act permit. And what is the next critical permit in the process?
Yes, thank you. That was a huge milestone for us. Our permitting team has been diligently going through this process, as you saw on our stakeholder engagement slide, for a number of years. Really, the next major catalyst will be that supplemental draft EIS out to the street in the third quarter of this year. We are advancing many of our ancillary permits in parallel, and we expect several of them require that final record of decision that we expect in late 23 before they can be penned final. But there are some we'll start to get ahead of that record of decision. And then the rest we're hoping will be timed so we get them right after the record of decision, which allows for, efficient and quick completion of our project financing and then ramp up to construction.
So how much rehabilitation needs to take place, if any, prior to construction?
A lot of the rehabilitation and restoration begins with construction. It's part of, as Chris said, our plan of operations and restoration. But what we have agreed to do is some early time critical removal actions and cleanup actions over the next 3 years. So we'll start some stream diversion work this summer that essentially is working to keep clean water clean and diverting water away from the historic mining areas to keep the water clean. So that will start this year. And then we've got more plans next summer to start work on removing, I think it's a total 325,000 tons of material. Again, all with this idea of trying to keep the water clean even before we get into construction and operations. And so really it's a voluntary commitment to our communities and to everyone that we are serious about cleaning up this area. And as of 12/31, we had a liability on the books of about $10 million to do that work. And that was included in the forecast and budget for the money we raised last August.
What mining practices will be implemented to ensure that the property can be reverted back to its natural state?
So I think as I mentioned, there's really restoration and reclamation ongoing as we mine. So nothing in terms of traditional haulage trucks and traditional equipment that we'll be using during the course of operations. But one of the things that we'll be doing early on in the mine plan that isn't necessarily connected to any material that will be processed is and I can flip back to that slide here. The slide on the left shows what we call Blowout Creek, and it's upstream of the Yellow Pine pit. And that is a historic old dam failure that was used way back to provide hydroelectric power to prior mining activities. That dam failed decades ago and contributes to a lot of the sedimentation that's blocking some of the stream. And so what we're doing in the early, I think it's the first few years of the project, is clearing out and cleaning up that sedimentation, that source of sedimentation, not reprocessing or not using any of that material, just simply cleaning it up to make that river more clean. So that's one example of how we're doing it. Another thing we're doing is we're building, over the course of mining, we're building a fish tunnel around the Yellow Pine pit. So that will allow for salmon to get upstream while we're mining. And then after mining concludes in the Yellow Pine pit, we will backfill that pit and allow that stream to go over that pit again, and then allow the fish to not have to use that tunnel anymore, but to go up through the regular course of stream flow. So those are a few examples.
How much infrastructure is already in place at Stibnite, and what modern mining technology and processes is Perpetua deploying at Stibnite toward improved economics?
The latter part on technology and how to improve economics, there's a few things we're doing that are state of the art. The first being that fish tunnel that Chris mentioned earlier that will help restore the picture on the right that's showing on the slide right now, that blocked fish migration. We will actually, in early construction, build a fish tunnel that will allow fish to reach those upper reaches of the river while we're mining. And then after we restore and backfill that pit, then the river will flow through over top of it again. So there's some really cool stuff there. In terms of technology, at this point, it's a pretty basic mining and processing facility. There's an autoclave and it's a pretty standard flow sheet. So nothing super new or exciting there, other than as technology advances and we look to construct and do our final detailed and basic engineering work, we will look for opportunities, whether it's on the ESG side to help lower emissions or help improve economics. We've got an exploration camp on site where when we get into construction, some of the camp could be used and will be used actually for the ASAOC work next summer. We have a core shed and maintenance facility and some equipment up there that we use to maintain the roads around site and make sure we can access all of our water monitoring points. And there is a road into site now, but it follows the Johnson Creek Way. And as Chris said, one of the things the Forest Service is assessing in the supplemental is another access route, and our preferred access route, which is a burnt log road, which would go up along a ridge line. And one, it provides 2 access routes to site, so it's safer. But also being up on that ridge, it keeps you away from avalanches. It keeps you away from that Johnson Creek River. And so that burnt log road access to site is the major proposed road in and our preferred way in. And we're looking forward to the Forest Service choosing the preferred alternative when the supplemental comes out in the 3rd quarter. So then we'll have further clarity on our preferred action going forward. In terms of other infrastructure, as Chris said, we've got access to low-cost Idaho hydropower. We will have to, in year 1 of construction, we would be focused on building that burnt log road and access into site, and then also upgrading that power line and building some additional power line into site. So there's infrastructure around the project and good access to it, but we will be upgrading or building and widening the burnt log road and extending that road about 14 more miles into site.
Are there any Native groups in the project area, and are there any agreements in place with them?
We are not on any reservation land, but there are 3 Native American groups that have tribal treaty access or rights to fishing and recreation around the project. So we have our philosophy has always been to engage often and early and be as transparent as possible. And so we are in constant communication, and those tribes are part of the permitting process as another government agency and cooperator, if you will, to the process. So there's government to government consultation that occurs through many of our permits with those tribes. We do have, with the Nez Perce tribe, in 2019, they filed a Clean Water Act lawsuit against us. And we are in mediation right now. So since February of 2021, we've been at the table with them and ultimately think we both want the same things for that site long term, and that's environmental improvements and restoring fish passage and helping clean up that area that has special use for them. And so we're happy to be at the table with them. We are very focused on finding those common ground and solutions going forward, and look forward to keeping the market apprised as we advance that mediation.
Thank you for your answer. And with that, this concludes the Q&A for today's presentation. And before we go, I'll just turn the floor back over to Chris for final remarks. Thank you all for joining us today, and happy to chat in the future. If there are any other questions, my contact information is listed on our website. So thanks again. And once again, this was Perpetua Resources Corporation, trading on the Toronto Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ under ticker symbol PPTA. Well, thank you again, everyone in New York and surrounding areas, for joining us today. Stay tuned for future presentations in your area, and we'll see you next time.